In the last episode, we took on pretty much every single location in Durotar, with the exception of 2 areas, which you'll see on the map there are signified with a castle, while all of the X'd swords are the ones that I have defeated. I then went around and did that for the Barrens, so I know where to go and where I have been. Later on, I am going to have to change that method, as it turns out you can only place so many of those icons at a time, so I will have to reduce all of the sword icons to just castles, and then as I defeat them, I'll remove the castle to signify that I have already defeated it or have been there. But either way, it is time to now take on the Barrens. So I start by going east and around the mountain that is just north of Ratchet. To warm myself up, I make a little stop to defeat a couple of rock noses that are walking around. Now, these are not typical rock noses or stone rock noses. I believe they were black ice ones if I remember correctly, but I fight them off with Cho-Cho, and they didn't really take that long to defeat because of the steel, or hardened steel rather, weapons that I have. Now we make our way to the Kalimdor area. Now, all of the various camps where the Kalimdors usually are in Warcraft still have all of the thorns around it like it usually does, but each of these different camps have different enemies. The first one that I walked up about have locusts. Now, locusts are not too terrible to fight, but I saw a queen, and a queen is a world boss. I was not going to be able to take that on at the moment, so I skipped her for right now. The next one that I went to had some Black Hand, which are pirates in the Conan Exiles game. These guys are Iron tier, so I was just about the right level to fight them on, and with Cho-Cho's help, I was able to defeat them without too many issues. They also had some pretty good loot, including some gems that is going to be going into my horde later on. I continued to the next couple of camps, where I find some trolls. Now, these are more primal trolls. I'm assuming that they are similar to the Dafari in terms of, level range, but that just means that they're not going to be that hard to take on. So I pretty much slaughter them all and loot what they have, which in their chests, they did have some pretty good items, as you see here. So I looted it and let Cho-Cho hold it, so I didn't have to be encumbered by it. After marking that off on my map that I've defeated that little area, I went to the next one. Now, this is the last of the first initial Kalimdor area in the Barrens, and just like all of the other camps, it had different enemies. This time, they were Sumerians, which are much harder to defeat than the last few groups that I had done. Now, I was able to take them on one at a time, and sometimes even 2 at a time, but you'll see that it just gets a little bit out of hand in this area, but they have some really good loot. So, after I defeated the first one, I pulled around the second and even third one, and not only did they drop Sumerian feasts, but they were dropping star metal weapons. You'll see this guy with the hammer here. As I take him on with Cho-Cho, I eventually loot him to find a star metal hammer. Star metal is pretty much like the best tiered weapons in the game, so upgrading from my hardened metal to the star metal is going to do a lot more damage. So I instantly equipped it. I didn't care if it was low durability or not. I pulled that sumbitch out. I had to take a screenshot or something with it because it looked so cool. But anyway, I said, okay, maybe I can take on more of them because now I can do way more damage. So that's what I did, slowly pulling them back one at a time, which worked for a while. Now, in the middle of the night here, you'll see that I do get jumped by a were hyena, which were hyenas are in Conan Exiles. They are followers of Jebel Sag. Now, the reason they are attacking me here for no reason is because it was still in the aftermath of the Halloween event, which was the great hunt for Jebel Sag, and every night these were hyenas would come out and attack you, and if you killed them, you could loot something that you could turn in for rewards with Jebel Sag's followers. Now, that's been happening since the start of the playthrough, and it's gonna keep going on for a little bit longer. It gets really annoying, and at one point it actually gets me into trouble, but you're not gonna see that for a few episodes. But after I defeat him, I continued on with the Sumerians, though it got to a point where it was just way too hard to handle. So I pulled back with Cho-Cho, I hopped on my horse, and I headed back home. Now, just outside of my base, well, first first of all, I went back home, I made a spear, and then I went back out on my horse because I was doing a couple of my journey quests. Now, for this one, I had to spear something while on horseback, so I went to the nearby rock noses that were just outside of my base, and I got some spearing practice in. Though it is also fun to fight horseback, so I'm going to be doing this a few more times throughout my playthrough, even though it is not the best way to get in damage. Though once I have an army of followers, doing this method will be fine because my followers will be doing most of the damage anyway. Now I went on to my first oasis. Now, all 3 oases in the Barrens have Dogs of the Desert, which are, I would say, roughly iron tiered difficulty, which is perfect for where I am right now, as I have pretty much iron tiered armor with star metal weapons, so of course I'm going to be doing a lot more damage. But for this first little camp that's just outside of the first oasis, I go on there on horseback while Cho pretty much tanks them. I take them out with my spear, no problem. Now, there are a couple of other camps scattered throughout, just like the Centaur are. Now, inside of the tents, you will find chests that will have roughly iron tier difficulty items, so some of them I take and some of them I leave behind because it's just not worth taking. Though I try to take as many of the roleplay decorative items as I can, because that means less materials to use in order to decorate my house once it's actually fully operational. And that's including the fortress that I will eventually build. But after a couple more kills, I continued on throughout the various camps until I can find the boss battle of this oasis. Now, each oasis, just like the oasis in the Barrens in World of Warcraft, have boss areas, basically where you would find the boss centaurs. Now, there are elites or named enemies in these camps, so I did find a couple of them at this one here. As you see, I saw the captain, as well as one of the stronger elite enemies next to him, though with my star metal weapon, they went out without an issue. I went back home for right now just to drop off all of the loot, because doing all of those camps at the same time, I looted so much that I really wanted to keep that I had no room for it and I was becoming encumbered, so I headed back to drop it all off. I also found a bell from the Emberlight mod. Now, Emberlight adds in a ton of different items from different types of weapons with their own unique style of fighting as well, but also it adds tons of decorative items, including this one. Now, this is a little pet that you could put around and you can have them wander around and stuff, but there's all different ones you can find by finding bells out in the world, either from chests or from looting enemies. But after I settle in my new little rhino pet, I headed to the crossroads where I found a blacksmith. Now, in the last episode, I said I had tamed a blacksmith. I was actually mistaken. I had tamed a taskmaster. So taskmasters I will need in order to speed up the process of turning a slave into a thrall, or I mean, that means the same thing, but you know what I mean. So taking somebody and turning them into a worker for me, it speeds up that process. But I actually do need a blacksmith, so I found one, and I took one by force. I left the Barrens dragging him by his ankles, and I turned him into a follower of mine in my house nearby. I made him some armor just like the other followers, but I also started to make armor for myself, because up until this point, I was using like very weak armor. Now, I do have some pieces of Sumerian armor, which is basically higher tiered yet light leather armor, so I have that for now to give me some good armor rating. And then I made myself a leather chest piece because I thought it would look cool with the aesthetic, as well as an iron tiered helmet that definitely matches the orcish theme. Now, if you notice, I installed the Fashionist mod, which is basically a transmog mod, which allows me to wear something but then have the appearance of something else, so it would definitely help in the roleplay aspect. After that though, I outfitted out my blacksmith, my taskmaster, and I started to give them names, such as Gruts, and even Silverhand. Of course, I have Zalazane and Cho, but I'm gonna start doing this for most of my followers. It'll help me keep track of them, as well as just kind of fit in with the roleplay nature of it. Now, Zalazane, as you notice, did not quite look like Zalazane. One of the best parts about the IQOL mod is that not only can you rechange what your character looks like, but you can change what your followers look like. So I hopped into the character creator menu. I had a picture of Zalazane up on my second screen, screen, and I try to make him look as close as possible, which basically means white braids. Now, Zalazane does need a mask to kind of fit that all together, which eventually I do make him a voodoo mask, but for right now, you're not going to see it. Now that I've settled in my new thralls and dropped off all of the items that I had accumulated over the last few raids, as well as make myself some new armor, I head to the next oasis, which is gonna be basically the same story as the last. It's all Dogs of the Desert. But first I stop at the outpost west of the Crossroads. Now this is normally in the area of World of Warcraft where you would get the Centaur quests, and where you would do that final big battle at the end with the elite quests. Now while a couple of the tents did have Horde members, one of the tents had clanless orcs, which are part of the Brigand faction. So of course they attacked me on the spot, and I was completely surprised. I did not expect them to be there, especially since the other huts had Horde members, so I had to take them out quickly before they could get a leg up on me. Though with my trusty hammer, I was able to take them on no problem. I expect I will tame a couple of these in the future, but for right now, I finished up, looted what they had, and I headed on to the actual oasis where the Dogs of the Desert were. Like I said, this is pretty much rinse and repeat of the last oasis because it has the exact same enemies, the exact same loot. I just want to clear it out for the sake of 100% progression. Now, there is something different about this oasis. There are elephants. Elephants, I would say, are mildly difficult. They are definitely difficult if you are a new player, but for someone who's a little bit more experienced, as well as the fact that I have a star metal hammer, I decided to take it on with Chocho, and it went actually fairly well. I thought that it was going to do a little bit more damage than it did. It still took a few moments, but I did manage to defeat the elephant, and I skinned it because elephant skin is actually very useful for endgame progression in making top-tiered armor. After I defeated the elephant, I continued on to the boss tent, but the elephant wasn't the only thing near this oasis. There are also tigers. Now, as you see me running across here, a tiger jumps me, but it actually doesn't jump me. It jumps a dog of the desert that had followed me. So together we take on the tiger, and once it's defeated, he decided to run back. I'm like, okay, cool. I saved his life, and he's gonna oh no, now he's attacking Chocho. Oh, hell no. Okay, I have to take him on. You do not hurt Chocho. He is my friend, and if you harm him, yeah, you're going down. So yeah, that was a short-lived friendship. But after that, I turn around and I head up to the boss tent. A couple of their members jump me, but I take them on no problem. Chocho slaps a couple of them in the face, and we defeated the boss, marking another oasis off of my map that is defeated. Now, even though Chocho slaps, literally and figuratively, I was starting to feel a little bit lonely, and I needed to start growing my warband. Now, if you remember from Season 1, I pretty much had a warband of like 5 or 6 orcs following me around, taking on all of the challenges of this Kalimdor world. So I head to the Crossroads, where I tamed a grunt. Now, this one I outfitted out with a little bit better gear than what I'm wearing, because thralls at the start are not really that strong, so you have to level them up for them to be competent at all. Now, there is a change to the thrall system that I will explain later on, as you will see it in practice, but for right now, I head to the Quillbar area again, where there are some cousins of Chocho waiting for me to approach them so they could smack me around. But little did they know I had a star metal hammer, so I completely take them out and level up my grunt a little bit more. But now that I had a grunt and Chocho, I thought, okay, I am outfitted out even more. I have a star metal hammer, I have Chocho, and I have my new thrall fighting for me. Let's take on these Sumerians once again, as I didn't quite do it the first time since they were outnumbering me. Now, this first little area here, I did manage to take on. It was very tricky, and my thrall, whom I named Stonefist, was taking quite a beating. He actually went down. I thought I had lost him already, but then I noticed he wasn't dead. He was downed. But that didn't stop from me being killed. I quickly ran back, and I saw that I could pick him back up, but he had a little icon next to his name. That is the new system that was introduced in the latest update of Conan Exiles. If your followers go down, they go down and you can pick them up, but it can only happen 3 times within a certain amount of period, and after they are felled 3 times within a certain period, they will die for good, but those debuffs will fall off. By falling back, eventually the debuff will leave them and they'll be completely fine again. But for right now, it was a little bit tricky for me, as the moment I picked them back up, they would just instantly go back down. And it wasn't easy on me either, as I was low health. There were 3 Cimmerians on me. My followers were slowly bleeding out in the field over there. I had to try to get them home. So eventually I did manage to just run up and run out with them, and luckily all 3 of us survived, but it was very hard. So I think I'm gonna have to come back later and try again. Yeah, I wasn't quite ready for how difficult this Cimmerian area was going to be, but with all of the loot I had accumulated, I did manage to start being able to make steel fire powder with the limited amount of brimstone I was able to find, so I can actually start making steel. Now, I'm not gonna use a lot of steel to make weapons and armor. I'm saving it to make steel reinforcements for my fortress later on. But for now, while that is cooking in the blacksmith bench, I head to the northern Barrens, where there are still plenty of areas to defeat, including this Dafari area, an actual Dafari area. And not only that, their tent had a trap, a spiked trap that did a lot of damage. Ouch. Anyway, they don't really have a lot for me because they are bone tiered, which is basically tier 0, so I continued on to the Venture Co area, at least the one by the pond, which is normally an oil-filled pond, but there was nothing there. I was actually mildly surprised that they didn't have anything there. I went to the Rogue Tower, where the rogues will do, I believe it was the lockpicking quest, and there was something there, but they are horde bound, so that means I could not fight them. There were a couple of chests that I was able to loot, but not much that was, really relevant for me to be there for. So I went to the Venture Co cave, or really the mine. Now, just outside of the mine is horde controlled, so none of these guys are going to attack me. They're very friendly. However, inside of the mine is a different story. You have tons of clanless orcs and forest trolls that will attack you on sight, and they are very aggressive and dangerous. I even had a couple of issues, not only in this season, but last season, trying to fight them. Though, if you take them on one at a time, it is not that bad. It is when you get a group of them that it starts to become an issue. But there's more than just that. There are white wolves, which are considered mini-bosses when it comes to the animal kingdom in this game. And there are also undead, which are much harder to fight than a normal enemy. There's also a random night elf that's kind of interesting. I don't know why the night elf is there. I remember it in the last game too, and now I remember taming her as well. I'll have to come back to tame her later on, but for now, I killed her. And I continued on to the mini-boss of the dungeon, where there is a forest troll berserker, and just like last time, they glitched into the wall. This same thing happened in the last season, where they just kind of glitched into the wall, but I think last time they went up into the ceiling and you could see their name, but they were just, stuck forever. This time I did manage to kill them, so that was a positive. After that, I got into a little bit of a pickle. I pulled a little bit more than I could handle, which is something that I warned about at the start of this, and the reason why is they managed to corner me into the wall, where I was basically stun locked, I couldn't move, and they killed me. So yeah, that was fun. Anyway, I ran back, I got my followers to refollow me, and I killed whoever was remaining after that little bit of a fiasco. Now, this cave is the cave that I mentioned before that has a small amount of brimstone. Now, I think I cut out that footage right here, but there's like a little bit of a water area in that cave that's got 2 nodes of brimstone, so it's not a lot, but it's enough to at least get me started on making steel, which is very much needed for my progression. So I gathered that up. There's also some silver node, so I took some silver as well, and I headed back home where I could start depositing all that stuff to start cooking into ingots, as well as upgrading. Now then, I did increase my experience gain really high, so I was able to get to level 60 already, which is the maximum level. However, really the level gain doesn't matter, because you could be level 60 from the start. Your progression is based about how much you grind. So even though I am level 60, I still have to grind and build everything in order to get to the end game. But part of that grinding will include a ton of ichor. Well, luckily I have the locusts. Now, I skipped them before because I was scared about pulling the boss, but I am going to try to take them on and not pull her, so I can get the sweet ichor in order to continue my progression, which I need ichor in order to make alchemic base, which you need to make the best armor in the game. I slowly pull them one by one, making sure I do not pull her, and it got really close. I was actually kind of scared that I was getting a little too close to her, but luckily I don't manage to pull her, and I get all the ichor I can so I can return home and start making that alchemic base. Now, you're familiar with a pickaxe. However, in this game, a pick and a pickaxe are completely different. A pick is solely for mining ore, and a axe is solely for harvesting trees, but a pickaxe can do both. So that will limit the amount of items I have to carry. I make myself a pickaxe and ditch the pick and axe and replace it with another weapon. I also start making that sweet alchemic base. And while everything is cooking, from the brand new ore I brought home to the alchemic base I just mentioned and all of the other stuff, I make my way to Ratchet, because since the last time I played, there have been several things added to Ratchet. However, they're hidden, so doing my quick little run through of the town, I didn't see them right away, and I assumed nothing had changed about Ratchet. So I continued on to the Merchant Coast, where supposedly the pirates would be, but there are no pirates. Instead, there are camps of Alliance. Now, if I had to guess, I'm assuming that these are of iron tiered quality enemies, so they are not really that hard, and as you can see there, I cleave them down very easy with my followers, though the one in the golden armor, which I can only assume is a type of officer, does hit a little bit harder, though I still manage to take them out relatively easy, and they do drop roughly about iron tiered quality items, so I think I am correct in my assumption of the level of difficulty at which they are fighting, and the reason why I can't tell is because I have the star metal hammer, so I am cleaving through them very easy, at least more so than if I had iron or tiered quality weapons. Now then, as I continued along the coast, I found their ship. This is normally a pirate ship in World of Warcraft, but it's an alliance ship here. I climb aboard it, and I look around to make sure there are no enemies up top, but I only see one, so I figured it was safe enough to hop aboard and take him on, only to then realize that he sounds the alarm to have everybody from below deck come up and rush to his aid, including a captain who is basically an elite, which is signified by the single skull under his name. A single skull means that they are elites, or I guess you could call them mini-bosses, but if they have two skulls, that means that they are a world boss and are going to be much harder. Now, luckily, I haven't found too many two-skull enemies yet on this map, but I have seen a couple of one-skulls, but either way, with the combination of all of his followers and his power level, I was not able to take them on, especially because my own followers did not want to follow me up onto the boat. There's a pathing issue where they just could not get up to me. So yeah, I'm gonna have to come back later. I signify that on the map and mark it as I still need to do the boat. However, I do clear the coast. So the coast, I'm gonna say, is finished in terms of my progression and conquest through the Barrens. Now then, I look ahead to see Frey Island and I say, should I go to Frey Island? Or, as I pan over and look at Alkaz Island, I thought to myself, in the last season, I managed to get star metal there, which is the strongest metal that you can get. Hell, look at the hammer that I've been praising all of this episode. So, I make that choice, I hop into the water, and I head to Alkaz Island.
This story shall also be told.